Narendra Surrender. That's what critics in India called the government's decision to negotiate with the United States after President Donald Trump imposed steep tariffs on Indian exports. They said India gave in. They said we folded under pressure. But now the story looks very different. On February 20th, 2026, the Supreme Court of the United States of America delivered a massive judgment. In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled that Trump's sweeping import tariffs were unconstitutional. In simple terms, the president did not have legal power to impose those tariffs also, the way he did. And here's what exactly happened. When Trump returned to office, he said America was facing two major threats. First, the flow of illegal drugs like fentanyl coming from countries such as Canada, Mexico, and China. Second, he said, and he called it unfair trade practices and large trade deficits that were hurting American manufacturing businesses. To deal with this, he used a 1977 law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or the IEEPA. Now, this law allows the president to take strong economic steps during a national emergency. Using this law, Trump imposed 25% tariffs on most imports from Canada and Mexico, 10% tariffs on many Chinese goods, with some going as high as, say, 145% and a minimum of it being 10%. Reciprocal tariff on imports from almost every country, and this included India. India was hit especially hard. 2 small American businesses and 12 US states challenged these tariffs in court. They argued that the IEEPA does not allow a president to impose taxes or tariffs, and the lower courts agreed. The case then went to the US Supreme Court. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, said something very basic but powerful. He said, US Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to impose taxes and duties, and that tariffs are basically taxes on imports. The court examined the text of IEEPA. It says that the president can regulate imports during an emergency, but it never clearly says that it can be imposed as tariffs. In the past also, whenever Congress wanted to give the president any kind of a tariff power, it said so clearly and with limits. But the IEEPA did not do so. The court also applied something called the Major Questions Doctrine. This simply means if the government wants to exercise a very big and powerful authority, which is especially one with huge economic impacts, the Congress must clearly authorize it. So the president cannot assume such a sweeping power just because the law is vague. 3 judges disagreed. Justice Brett Kavanaugh argued that tariffs are normal and they're a tool of regulating foreign trade, and that the president should have such flexibility during any emergency. But the majority was clear. These tariffs were illegal. Now think about what this means for India. When India negotiated with the US under tariff pressure, opposition leaders mocked the government. They called it Narendra Surrender. It was a dig at Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They said India gave away too much. But the US Supreme Court has now effectively said that the very tariffs used to pressure India were unconstitutional from the very start. So now the big question is, was the pressure India faced even legally valid? If the tariffs were illegal, India may have grounds to revisit the concessions it made at that time. Indian exporters who paid these duties could potentially even seek refunds and stuff like that. The entire episode looks different now, and here's the twist. Within hours of the judgment, Trump announced a workaround of sorts. He invoked Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, a rarely used law that allows temporary tariffs of up to 15% for 150 days without Congress. So a new 10% global tariff is set to kick in on February 24. The question now remains, what does this show? It shows that in the United States, even the president can be checked by small businesses and the courts. It also shows that politics moves fast and leaders will look for other legal tools when one door closes. The narrative of Narendra Surrender now needs a rethink. what looked like weakness may actually have been pragmatic and diplomacy under pressure.